Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about how to multiply and divide complex numbers. So, the first thing we're going to get to is how do we multiply complex numbers. Basically, when you go to do this, there's a couple things you want to keep in mind. Number one, you're going to kind of treat I like it's a variable. Okay, if you think of it as a variable, this becomes a lot easier process. Kind of similar to what we did with adding and subtracting, where if we thought of it as a variable, just combine like terms, it made it pretty easy. Okay, we're going to do it the same way. So basically, that means that a lot of these problems are going to boil down to being foiling problems or distributing problems or things like that. The one thing we do have to keep in mind, though, is that any time we end up with an I squared, that actually equals -1, so we can replace it with a -1 and then multiply that by that or whatever we need to do, okay? So, for example, we have right here 4 times -2 plus 3i. The very first thing we do is we would distribute, so we would have -8 plus 12i. Now, there's nothing else for me to simplify here. That's pretty much all I can do. There's my answer. There's my complex solution that I would get. Okay? This second one here, I would go ahead and do the same thing. So I distribute, say, all right, I'm going to do 3 times 3. We'll do 3 times -2i, 2i times 3, and 2i times -2i. We have to FOIL this one because it kind of looks like two binomials being multiplied by each other when we have these two complex numbers being multiplied. So my 3 times 3, I get 9. My inner 2i times 3i is going to be plus 6i. We have 3i times -2i is going to be -6i. And then 2i times -2i is going to be minus 4i squared. Now, first thing I'll notice is that I have a 6i and a -6i. I can combine those together, and actually they're going to disappear, right? 6 minus 6 is 0, so I'm going to get 9 minus 4i squared. But I can't leave my problem like this either because I know that I squared equals -1. So really what I have is 9 minus 4 times -1. And if I do 4 times -1, I'll get -4. 9 minus -4, I'm going to get 13 as my answer. So weirdly enough, when I multiply these together, my I term kind of canceled out, and I ended up with just a real number, 13, okay? Yet that will not always happen. In fact, for this last one that you're going to try on your own, that one you will have an I term that's going to show up. Just remember that the I squared equals -1, and make sure you simplify accordingly. Go ahead and pause the video, go ahead and try this last one, and we'll meet back together and check our work. Okay, welcome back. I got 11 plus 2i, and here's how I did that. I went ahead and FOILed this out. 2 times 4 was 8, 2 times 3i was 6i, -i times 4 is -4i, and -i times 3i is -3i squared. I then combine like terms, 6i, -4i become 2i. I squared is really -1, so -3 times -1 is a plus 3. Combine those two together, I get 11 plus 2i. That's all you have to do for multiplying. It's really, again, if you think of it like a variable, pretty much the same procedures there. Just remember that I squared equals -1. Now, division is a little bit different. In fact, division is a lot more like the multiplication we just did than it is really like division that you're used to, okay? When you go to divide, what you're actually going to be doing is you're going to be almost like rationalizing the denominator. You're actually going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by what's called the complex conjugate, okay? The complex conjugate basically is that you take the imaginary component of your complex number and you change the sign. If it's positive, you make that part negative. If it was negative, you make it positive, okay? Basically, you just do the opposite of it. And then that's what you're going to multiply by. And what that's going to do is very similar to when we rationalize the denominator. It's going to make it so that your I term disappears, and you end up with an answer that is basically what you would get by dividing those two numbers. Let's take a look at what that would look like. So let's start with this example over here. I have 2 plus 3i. I'm dividing by 4 minus 2i. What I would do is I'm going to multiply by a giant 1. That is the complex conjugate. In this instance, that would be 4 plus 2i. Remember, all I do is I change the sign of that second number. And that's going to be over 4 plus 2i. Again, it's like I'm multiplying by a giant 1. So in the numerator, I'll go ahead and FOIL this. So I'm going to get 8 plus 4i plus 12i plus 6i squared. And in the denominator, I'm going to FOIL it as well. So I'm going to get 16. I'm going to get minus 8i plus 8i minus 4i squared. And what you should notice, again, is that these two terms are going to cancel out, getting rid of that I term for us. And then negative 4i squared, obviously, can simplify that. So let's go ahead and simplify that. Let's put some work over here. So I'm going to combine these together. So I'm going to have 8 plus 16i minus 6, because again, I squared is negative 1. In my denominator, this is going to disappear. So I'm going to have 16, negative 1 times negative 4, so it's going to be plus 4. And then when I combine these together, I'm going to have 2 plus 16i over 20, which we want to write this like a complex number, so we're going to split this fraction. We're also going to simplify. So I'm going to get 1 over 10, right? 2 over 20 is 1 over 10, plus 16 over 20, let's see, that would be 8 over 10, which would be 4/5 I. And that would be my final answer. So basically, we multiply by that complex conjugate in the numerator and the denominator. That'll make your I term disappear in your denominator. And then you go through and you just simplify as much as you can until you get to that answer. Go ahead and try this one over here and then unpause the video and check back with me and see how you did. All right, so I got 16/13 plus 2/13 I. What I did is I multiplied by that 5 minus I in the numerator and the denominator. That's my complex conjugate. As you can see, this is kind of what it'll simplify to. I didn't bother writing the, you would have gotten like plus 5i minus 5i. I didn't bother writing that because it's going to cancel out. This will simplify into, remember I squared is negative 1, so negative 2 times negative 1 is plus 2. So it'll simplify into 32 plus 4i over 26. And then you simplify that and you get 16/13 plus 2/13 I. That's multiplying, dividing complex numbers. I hope you all had a good time doing that, and have a nice day. Thanks for watching.